On today's episode, I'm going to take my time with you and explain my personal journey with trauma and nutrition and how my own path toward healing led me to integrate somatic psychology with holistic nutritional counseling and how the two together have an impeccable ability to help people recover from stress and trauma. I want to begin the episode by saying I have developed the most comprehensive nutrition group thus far called Embodied Nutrition, which begins on July 8th. And this Embodied Nutrition program is a 6-month program. And I'm trying to not say program because people think that means there's testing and there's these really deep studies and research you have to do to get certified. It is not a certification program. It is a self-help group, a 6-month group experience where we are learning how foods affect our biochemistry, specifically as it relates to blood sugar, the nervous system, and the adrenals, which are 3 things in the body. Our glucose, our adrenals, and our nervous system deeply impact our ability to respond to stress. Meaning, do we have the capacity to metabolize and have a conscious response when something stressful is happening? Or do we have very low capacity and we turn over into a trauma response and lose complete control of our minds and then have to recover and then shut down, so on and so forth? Your glucose levels, your adrenal health, and your nervous system health have so much to do with this. And when the foods you're eating are negatively impacting these systems by stimulating or depressing them instead of balancing them, you're actually having what I call food-induced stress. So you're having an internal fight or flight response just from what you ate, not even from the stress you've incurred in your life that day or before that day. So I think it's really important to understand I'm going to be teaching nutrition through that lens, not through good or bad, not through healthy or unhealthy, but very specifically which foods stimulate, depress, or balance glucose, the adrenals, the nervous system. And understanding food that way allows you to become a conscious alchemist. You can decide, you know what, I need a stimulant this morning because I did not sleep last night and I'm very exhausted. I need to charge my brain and nervous system. I need to stimulate my adrenals. I'm going to have coffee. But I'm going to eat this specific meal before I have the coffee. So it's a slow stimulation instead of a massive stimulation that overwhelms me or breaks me down or puts me into fight or flight to the point where I'm feeling traumatized by my morning coffee. So you get to consciously create your meals day to day, your snacks day to day, based on your circumstances, what you're needing, and even learn how to balance out stimulating foods and depressing foods with balancing whole food nourishment. So you're able to use them appropriately instead of having these foods use you, which happens when we develop food dependence and food addiction. Now, in addition to talking about nutrition and how it impacts the body for 6 months, we're also going to be pendulating every other session to somatic psychology, meaning what are the sensations and emotions and events? What are the relational needs and the emotional needs behind food cravings, behind food habits, behind dieting? What has been overcoupled or associated with food and my body and the food I eat or don't eat? Does rebellion come up when I try to develop a new guideline for myself? Does fear come up? Do I suddenly feel like I'm being restricted and something's being taken from me? Do I not know how to be with the emotions that emerge when I'm experimenting with my diet? We're going to hold all of this. And this is why I'm saying it's the most comprehensive group I've created so far, because it's not just teaching you about nutrition. It's not just teaching somatics. It's teaching how we bring the two together. So for the rest of your life, you have a very, very specific guideline, toolkit, compass to help you navigate food as you age and change. Because I personally don't believe in developing one diet for life. I think it's a constant communication with your body day to day on what it's needing. And learning how to feel into the body and decipher sensations is a very helpful thing to do. And somatic experiencing, which I'm trained in, really helps us learn how to do that. So we can understand if we're desiring food or craving food from an emotional place or from a nutritional place, or sometimes even both. So if you're interested, just visit my website, holisticlifenavigation.com, and click on events and click on virtual. And you will see the nutrition group there. You can click on it, you can look into it, you can get all the information you need on the page. It is $185 per month for 6 months, or there is a discount for one-time payment. And every single class is recorded, so you get replays. We're going to have sound healings to help us integrate into our body what we learned, group demos, group exercises, Q&As, lots and lots of different ways to learn, and lots of tools to leave with when you're done. You can also look in the episode details, and the link should be there to sign up for this program. Again, this nutrition group is beginning on July 8th, which I believe is a Tuesday, and registration closes the day before July 7th, so a little less than a month. Go check it out and email us with any questions. Now, how did I get here? How did I start understanding, or desiring, I should say, an understanding for nutrition and how it impacts stress response? The first thing I want you to know about me is I was essentially chained to a trauma response of binge eating for most of my life. Probably 20 years or more easily. It developed when I was very, very young, because around the age of 5 years old, it's very blurry, I was molested in a bathroom at a urinal by some strange man. To this day, I have no idea who he was. And that molestation began a really big divide in my body. It turned on my sexuality at a young age. And this is really common for prepubescent experiences around sex, specifically sexually traumatic ones or sexually abusive ones. So being molested before puberty, it invoked the energy of sexuality in my body, and I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't tell anybody. Around the same era, I was going to a daycare, which were a place where people were abusing us. The adults that were running the daycare were secretly abusing the kids. And I mean, they would be beating us, they'd be threatening us, they would make fun of us. I remember if we were watching a movie or a show and we laughed, because it was a funny part, they'd make us stand in front of the classroom with our arms straight up in the air until our arms were shaking and we were sweating and we were really tired and in pain. So I went through these really early years of specific traumatic experiences, even though I had a really beautiful, loving home, which is important to say, because when we think of childhood developmental trauma, we always think there must have been some abuse in the house. And I didn't have any abuse in the house. My parents were very loving. My father was very absent. And we have been repairing that for the last 15 years quite beautifully. But he was very absent because he didn't know how to parent, because his father was very absent and he had a lot of trauma with his dad. So he didn't have that ability, that capacity to hold space for a son. And my mother was extremely loving, extremely close, extremely emotional and available, and highly attuned to me. And one of the ways she would soothe me when I was upset was with food. So very early on after these abuses, again, no one knew about them. My parents discovered the abuse that was happening at the daycare because one day they came to pick me up early unannounced and they heard me being beaten by one of the women and crying. My dad broke down the door, took me out, and there was a whole lawsuit for many of the parents against this daycare. The daycare ended up closing. But anyway, besides that experience, I never had therapy. I never had play therapy. That was not part of my culture growing up. I grew up in southern central Pennsylvania. We call it the Middle South. The Middle South, rather. Some people call it Pennsyltucky or Pennsylvania, and it's all true. And growing up there really was what actually motivated me to go into nutrition, which I'll get to in a moment. But as life went on, as my life went on, I would endure endless bullying and harassment and several cases of sexual assault. And that would all happen because of my feminine disposition. I was born with an intersex condition. Intersex is a physical, biological condition of the body, an expression of the body. It's not an identity, has nothing to do with sexuality. It affects those things, but it is a biological expression. And it shows up in 3 ways. It shows up in chromosomes, in genitalia, and in hormones. And what makes a body intersex is from birth and through development, especially through puberty, your body is developing in an ambiguous way. So you're not having a typical male or female development. You're having a little bit of both. My intersex condition affected my hormones. So I had a biochemist explain this beautifully to me in the last year, which helped because it's been a mystery for a long time. Even doctors were puzzled. In the womb, somehow I was bathed with an excessive amount of estrogen. And when I was born, my nipples were puffy. And the doctor said that's a signal that or a sign that he has been bathed in a lot of estrogen. That will all go away in a couple weeks. My mother, who was unable to breastfeed, fed me soy formula. And so I believe already having lots of estrogen in my body, plus being raised early on soy formula, increased my estrogen dominance. And in that increase, my DNA actually started expressing, my genetics expressed more female. It was like my body was being given the instructions, which DNA, genetics are kind of instructions for your cells in your body and how your body is supposed to express and develop and what diseases it gets or doesn't get and so on and so forth. And the instructions my body was being given were to develop like a woman, even though I have male genitalia. So I was developing like a little girl, meaning I started developing breast tissue in the 5th grade. In middle school, I had full-on breasts. My hips started spreading out so quickly. I have stretch marks still from my hips spreading out. I couldn't put on any muscle. I didn't have any, I had late onset, let's say, pubic development of the pubic hair. And it took me a while to go through puberty compared to my other peers. And so I felt very female. I looked female in many ways, and I was completely confused about this penis I had. I would spend hours in the bathroom looking at it, trying to find the incision because I believed it had been sewn on and everyone was lying to me. I didn't believe I was male. And the doctors didn't know much about intersex at the time, still don't. And they would say something to me during my physicals. I remember in 7th grade, "Oh, don't worry, the fat on your chest will go away." They never called them breasts. They said the fat on your chest will go away. It has to do with your weight, because I had simultaneously gained a lot of weight. And here's where the whole piece comes in, because I was eating so much food. I was binging on so much food to quell the pain, the hell, the fire inside of my body from being tormented at school for having breasts and hips, for being sexually assaulted, which I kept to myself, from being confused since I was age 5 around my sexuality, from being molested by some strange man in a bathroom, by being bullied every day at school, and by hating myself from all of it. Probably the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me was how much I ended up hating myself, because even after being sexually assaulted, it was over. He was gone. It didn't happen again. It did with other people 3 times, but each individual, it only happened once and they were done out of my life. However, my self-hatred was this constant drip, this IV drip of stress and adrenaline and shame, which kept me completely shut down. The only thing that quelled the fire and angst from my own shame and disgust and pain and fear from all these experiences, especially the experience of going to school the next day and being bullied more, was food. I ate so much food that I became overweight, probably 70 pounds overweight by middle school. So when I went to the doctor, understandably, they thought that my chest was just fat. And so I got it in my head, okay, I need to lose all this weight so I can get rid of this chest, which has caused me so much pain. Because my chest was the reason I was being bullied. It was the reason I was sexually assaulted. It was the reason I was being toyed with and treated like an object. I've said before, I have the rare and strange experience of being a man, yet experiencing misogyny. And it's part of the blessing, if you will. It's kind of like our contribution to society as intersex people, as well as transsexuals who cross over into the opposite sex, or intersex people who are just born with ambiguous sex expressions. We dip our toe into these different societal identities and sex classes and learn so much. However, when you're dipping your toe in those against your will because of how your body is or how your mind works, it's extremely traumatic. I wasn't seeing this as a gift growing up or going through it. However, now I look back and I actually feel grateful for all of that. But in the moment, I had no way of being with those sensations. My parents knew I was being bullied, but no one knew I was assaulted. One case of assault was so intense that the boy grabbed my breast so hard with his fingernails that he left deep deep cuts that scarred over, and eventually the scars went away. But for months, as I would undress in front of the mirror, I was confronted with his aggression and his objectification of me when I would see those scars looking back at me. And I was terrified someone was going to see them and somehow associate me as doing something wrong. Because when you're a child and that kind of abuse is done to you, or that kind of torment or assault is done to you, you instantly internalize it as something you did wrong. So I lived with so much fear through my entire childhood. And to add to that fear, I also believed I had HIV, because one of the boys who assaulted me in my sleep, and I was too afraid to get up and do anything about it, ejaculated inside of me and told me that he had been with a prostitute. And I know what I'm saying is very intense, but it's my experience. And so I was living with the fear of, I must have HIV now, because I also grew up in an era where if you were gay or had any kind of gay sex, you were assumed to have HIV. And so it was a really scary time for me. I was hiding my bisexuality. I was hiding my assaults. I was hiding my molestation. I was hiding my fear of having HIV. I was sick all the time from binge eating, which made me think I had cancer or AIDS or some horrible autoimmune condition, because I was so ill. I was so ill, I missed so much school that in the 6th grade, they said if I missed any more, they'd have to hold me back. So I was really in a pretty awful place in all throughout middle school. It was like the biggest hell I'd ever experienced. And all that being said, the only thing that would help me or support me very deeply was food. I had to eat lots and lots and lots of food to be able to slow down my brain, quiet my nervous system, and suppress and repress the pain that would come up from these experiences that I was holding by myself. And this is what's interesting about food, especially when we have childhood trauma. We don't have the agency to really speak to the trauma or respond or fend off the trauma, or say the traumatic experience. So if someone's abusing us and we're young, we don't have the agency to fight or flight. We're kind of stuck with them, especially if they're our caregivers. In this case, I had so much shame I was sitting with. I didn't have the agency to speak it. I was too terrified. I didn't have the agency in the moment when I was being actually assaulted or abused or taken advantage of to push away or say no. I just shut down, either pretended to sleep, froze, or completely acquiesced and sexually fawned to survive the experience so I didn't get beat up or worse, outed publicly. So all these things were sitting in me, and all these things were building up in me. And when you don't have agency as a young person to respond to the events or renegotiate them, you find agency in how to soothe them. So you watch a lot of TV, or you eat a lot, or you don't eat a lot. Most of us, and most of the people I've worked with, including me, obviously, from the story, we learned how to renegotiate the feelings in our body based on what we ate or what we didn't eat. So some people fall into the spectrum of, I withhold food and I get to have some sensational control over what I feel and experience. Even if the control is how my body looks, at least I get to control something. There's a predictability to that, and there's a sense of agency that I didn't have when I was being violated. Same thing's true for overeating. When you overeat, you get to physically change the state inside of your body. Biochemically, as you're overeating, your chemistry is shifting minute by minute based on glucose spikes or glucose dips, based on adrenaline, based on dopamine, serotonin. All these hormones, this cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones are being released, especially when we're binging on processed foods. And it's physically changing our state as if we took a pharmaceutical for depression or pain. So we want to understand that at a very early age, we start to find a way to renegotiate experiences we don't have any control over based on how we're eating, or I should say, renegotiating our experiences we don't have control over via our food. So by the time we're adults, we have already developed for 10, maybe 15 years or more, a strategy via food to not feel or to feel delight or pleasure or comfort, or to not feel pain or overwhelm or fear or anxiety. So I had been deep in this. And to rewind a little bit, when the doctors told me, once you lose weight, these breasts will dissolve. Essentially, they said the fat on your chest will go away and you'll have a normal male chest. Now, there's nothing I wanted more in my life from 5th grade onward than to have a male chest. I did not want breasts because of the horrible attention and dysphoria it gave me. So what I ended up doing was going to the other end of the spectrum. I stopped binging and I went into, I would say, bulimic patterns and even some anorexic patterns of extremely low calorie intake. Very low. We're talking a couple hundred calories a day, maybe 300 or less, with lots of walking on a treadmill, running at school, and getting very sick and ill and exhausted while doing it. But I rapidly lost a bunch of weight. Interestingly enough, around this time, my testosterone started to increase. I started developing more like a boy. I started getting taller. I started getting slimmer. I started getting hairier. I started feeling more like a man, which was a very strange experience, having secretly identified more female all through my puberty. But I'm saying that because testosterone is really great at burning fat. And the less fat you have on your body, as a man, the more testosterone your body's able to make. Fat actually turns testosterone into estrogen. So not only was I already born with high estrogen, then I had the soy, then I had all this fat. My body was just so estrogenated at this point. So I lost all this weight. I had this flat stomach. I was extremely thin. My fingers were thin. My face was thin. I remember one day my mother saying, "You do realize you're thin, right? You don't have any excess weight. You're not overweight anymore. Like, you realize you're at the point where you need to stop." And I heard her and I realized she's right. I need to stop this, crazy dieting and overworking out, through cardio and running and walking, because it's going to get really unhealthy. So I was quite thin, yet nothing changed with my breasts. And that was a whole other terror that I was living with, because I was really banking on weight loss to be this magic breast loss. And I could just blend in and be a normal guy and no one would notice me. But my dysphoria got even more intense because as I was thin now and developing more as a man, my genitals were developing more and I was feeling much more masculine, I still had these breasts. So my sex dysphoria and my body dysmorphia just increased. And I had so much shame that my breasts didn't go away. And that's when I realized these are breasts. This is not fat. I had so much shame that I had breasts. I felt like this creature. I felt like this deformed, thing that no one knew what to call or do anything with, that it just added to my shame and shutdown. And I went right back into binging. Now, for me, when I went back into binging, this is around age 15 or so, I was binging so heavily, yet not gaining weight. Because at this point, I had this metabolic transformation. So I was able to eat a lot of food without putting on any weight. However, my cholesterol was skyrocketing. I had extreme cystic acne all over my face and back because my liver, which was impaired from 2 6-month rounds of Accutane, which is a powerful acne medication, and it also can destroy the liver. On top of that, I had severe asthma. I had to use an inhaler through the day whenever I did any activity, and I had to do a nebulizer in the morning, in the afternoon, or the evening, depending on how bad it was. A nebulizer is like this machine that has steroids that come through with like a mist, like a vapor that you breathe in. I would do 30-minute rounds twice a day with that. So I was being pumped with steroids, I had all these autoimmune issues, and I was very sick still, even though I was very thin, because I was overeating so many processed foods. And when you're overeating processed foods, you're not being nourished. You're getting lots of calories, you're getting lots of glucose, but you're not getting those micronutrients, like no minerals or vitamins, if any, maybe from the enriched flour in the cereal I was eating, and maybe some protein from the milk in my cereal, but nothing of good substance or quality. So lots of calories, lots of glucose, but not really a lot of nutrients. So my body was highly inflamed because of this. But I say this part of my life, I kind of want to snapshot that for you, because we think of binging as being overweight or leading to weight issues, but a lot of us can binge and not gain any weight and look quite fit or thin even, but on the inside, the body's going through quite a lot. So I'm going to fast forward now. I am in the 12th grade, I am taking college level psychology courses because I decide I want to be a psychologist. I want to help people. Again, I still haven't talked about anything that happened in my life. I'm still living with the shame of having breasts. I found a way to dress where I was able to put all these layers on where no one could see my breasts. So I was passing, no one really thought anything of it. And they kind of forgot I even had them in school. I stopped being bullied. I stopped getting made fun of. I started feeling more confident. I discovered music. My life was really changing in these positive ways. Yet I was still binging because I had no relationship to the sensations in my body. So I graduate and I start going to college, right? I already had several credits from college courses I started in senior year of high school. And in 1 year into the college, I realized I had kind of like an existential crisis of, oh, I don't want to be a psychotherapist. I don't want to be a licensed clinical social worker. And I realized that because of the DSM, which is the manual we use to diagnose people. I shouldn't say we, because I'm not a licensed therapist, but a manual therapists use to diagnose people. And this manual, for all the good it can be to help people find an identity around what they're feeling, there can be incredible healing and benefits from that. I mean, this manual has also been used against people. Women with hysteria, men who are gay with having some kind of psychosis for being homosexual. It has been used against certain minority groups, but it also deduces everyone down or reduces everyone down to behavior, never questioning the cause or what else is there. And early on in not my training, but my schooling, I would say to my professors, I understand about someone who's a sociopath. I understand narcissistic personality disorder, but what caused that? And they would all say nothing. That's just who they are. And I just couldn't accept that. Something in me was like constricting every time I heard that. Simultaneously, I was working across the street from my college at a health food store for money to help pay as I was going through college. And I was promoted to the front counter to sell vitamins and supplements to people who needed it, because I initially started as I don't know what they call, like back of house guy. It was a very conservative Christian business, and I was a practicing witch in the closet, bisexual at the time, blending into this extremely conservative Catholic and Christian company. And they had these very, very tight gender roles. And so the men were in the back working, or the only man, me, in the back working, and the women were in the front with makeup on selling. And I had started doing my own personal education while I was there, my personal studies of the books I was reading and the vitamins I was taking. And I was learning how to reverse all these extreme illnesses and conditions I had that doctors said would never be reversible, that would only be treatable with medication. And within a couple months, my asthma was gone. My cystic acne was gone. My weight was being maintained already because I had a high metabolism at this point. But I had less inflammation. My skin was getting better. My hair started getting curly. I never really said publicly I'd never had curly hair. So there was some hormonal genetic sequence. Something was changing in my body, and my body was transforming. And I was amazed by this, like how my mood, my anxiety, and so many things were getting better just from my diet changing and from taking certain supplements. And I remember going to my classes thinking, wow, I'm being taught and eventually trained to diagnose someone and get them on the right medication and treat them for life. When I'm seeing clients come into my health food store and I'm seeing my own body, I'm seeing this transformation in people just from what they're eating and how they're changing their lifestyle. And I didn't finish. I cut myself off, and I was saying they promoted me to the front because I had reversed all my own conditions I had or all my conditions on my own. They were also my own conditions, through this self-study I was doing around nutrition and supplements. And I got so good at understanding food and the body and herbs and vitamins and minerals that I was out one day stocking the shelves, and this guy came in who no one liked. He was a little depressed. He was overweight. He was kind of annoying to everybody because he would just kind of sit around and ask lots of questions and didn't want to leave. And I could feel his heart. I could feel he was just longing for some connection and affection. He seemed very lonely, very isolated. So I made some eye contact with him. We started talking. We created a friendship. And I was just giving him the things that I had been doing, and he started taking them. And he came back in a couple months later, and he had lost like 20, 30 pounds. His medications, he was able to get off of them. His depression lifted. And I thought, okay, I'm 18 and a half years old. And this man who has had depression for decades, who has seen therapists for decades, doctors for decades, no one can help him. He has reversed all his conditions in 3 months from diet and supplements alone. And that's when I knew I had to drop out of school and just follow a nutrition path. And I said earlier in this that part of what informed this decision was the culture I grew up in. Because I grew up in a lower class, blue collar family and culture, society. That was where I'm from in Pennsylvania. People don't go to therapy there. They still don't. But especially when I was growing up in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, no therapy. So in the 2000s, ooh, my neck, that felt good. In the 2000s, I was going to school, studying, wanting to be trained, but I was noticing people aren't going to therapy unless they've already had debilitating issues, unless they've been admitted to a hospital, for mental health problems, or are going through a massive trauma, like some kind of grief or becoming orphaned or some kind of emotional breakdown. They have to go to a therapist so they can rehabilitate. And I was noticing my clients at the health food store were all people who would never, one, afford therapy or let themselves go to therapy. Therapy at the time when I was growing up, and it still is like this for a lot of, especially lower class, lower middle class, blue collar families and cultures, a lot of people think that therapy is just for the rich. And they're not entirely inaccurate. I mean, it is very expensive, and it's a privileged thing to do, to have the time to sit around and think about what's wrong with you. And I've gone to plenty of therapy. I am a somatic therapist. I educate people in this. I believe in therapy. And there's kind of a reality check that not everyone has access to it. And not everyone has the time to sit and think and reflect and talk. A lot of the people I was serving, they worked 2 jobs. They were very uneducated. A lot didn't even graduate from high school. So it was really satisfying to have this whole other demographic that would never seek support for mental health would say, my cholesterol is really bad and my doctor doesn't know what to do. Do you know anything I could eat for that? It was like a different way of getting into their mental health and their body and even their traumas. So as I was working with them through the health food store over the next year, I was seeing so many conditions reverse, so many shifts happening. And the next, I don't know, I guess since then to this moment now, my dedication and focus was on studying nutrition and how it affects the body. Mostly self-studying until I did a course. It was a distance course for 2 years with the Trinity School of Natural Health, and I became certified in nutritional counseling. And that's when I opened up a private practice and began working with lots of different people. After years of publicly working with people for free in health food stores and wellness centers and yoga studios and such. So I got to get this amazing education from the field of learning so many different people and demographics and backgrounds and how their body and their minds and their spirits relate to food. And so where it took me was 10 years of being in private practice as a nutritionist, as a nutritional counselor, really teaching people how to eat and seeing massive change, but always seeing people hit a wall. Seeing people get to this place where they know what's good for them, they know what will balance their body, but unable to do so. And that unable to do so is trauma. Trauma is a sensational experience. Trauma is not my mom yelled at me when I was 5. Trauma is not I was molested in the bathroom. Trauma is what happened to my body after I was molested in the bathroom. Trauma is the sensation I am left with, is the posture I am left with, is the self-perception and the worldview I am left with after the event takes place. It is a very embodied biological, biochemical experience that keeps going until it is addressed for most of us. There can always be spontaneous remission of anything, I believe. But it was fascinating to notice, we don't know how to sit with sensation. And like I said earlier, food is like a pharmaceutical. Refined foods drastically change your biochemistry. They create state changes, just like a drug would do. So if you're used to using food and having refined foods in your life to numb certain things out or change certain states, and then you suddenly get rid of those foods, you are overnight confronted with the reality of how you feel. You are now unable to tolerate what is intolerable, whereas before the food allowed you to tolerate the intolerable. So it's a sense of what I call food sobriety, where I'm suddenly flooded with sensations I've never had to feel. And for me, binge eating for over 20 years, that was 20 years of quelling and reducing and numbing out sensational experiences and postures and memories that I had no capacity to be with or even imagine seeing in my mind or sitting with. So this is what made me, I was about to go back to school, and I was working with a psychologist at the time and a psychoanalyst, two of them. And I was saying to them, I think I'm going to go back to school. And they said, Luis, you don't need to go back to school. You have a great gift for this. You have a great eye, an amazing instinct. You need to do the somatic experiencing program, because I had just started it. And it's a 3-year program. They said, this is all you're going to need. I'm telling you, do this program. It's going to save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of going to school just to not even use the therapy you went to school to be trained in, because they knew my aversion to bureaucracy and insurance and the DSM. And they were right. I'm so grateful. I had these, I still have them, these golden, they're my supervisors essentially. Legally, they're consultants because I'm not licensed, so I can't get legal supervision, but they act as supervisors legally as consultants for me, a psychoanalyst, psychologist, to help me integrate this in a very therapeutic way. So it's not just nutrition, and it's not just somatics, it's this incredible integration of the two, as you would work with someone who just lost their mother, or someone who lost their job, or someone that has anxiety at night. So I was spending years then training in somatic psychology, specifically the branch somatic experiencing, and integrating the ability to sit with sensation, to track the body, to be in relationship with the body and what it's holding around food changing. So it's like this art of titrating people off of the refined foods that numb them. And while I'm titrating them off or reducing those foods, sensations start to emerge. So as the refined foods come down, the sensations come up to the surface. And then the individual has the tools and the capacity to actually welcome these sensations that are coming up to the surface to be expressed. Whereas before, without the somatic element, the sensations would come up. We have no way of being with them, and we go right to what has been tried and true, our food habits. And so someone would go back and forth between the shame of I can't do this to motivation of I'm going to change my diet, and then back to the shame I can't do this, when really it's just people need to be taught how to sit with emotion as they come to the surface. And we need to see nutrition and shifting our diets through the lens that we see any kind of addiction recovery from harsh chemical substances or drugs. We have to see it through that same lens, and that's how I see it. Even if you don't have an eating disorder per se, or you haven't been diagnosed with one, if you've used food and food habits to get through the day, to find safety, to fall asleep at night, to meet and greet your emotions that come up, you have developed a dependence on food giving you a certain outcome. And when you reduce the refined foods that end up causing illness, if you have too much of them in your diet for too long, then you no longer have these needs being met of comfort, of falling asleep easily, of waking up really quick to go to work, of getting through the day when you're holding grief or terror, right? All that starts to come up. So you need the somatic piece with the nutritional piece. And this is my long way of saying to you, it's taken me over 20 years to really understand and develop this integrated practice of embodied nutrition therapy. And my book, which comes out April 2026, which is called Food Therapy, it is a deep dive into all of this. And I cannot wait for this book to be out so I can just say to people, hey, go read my book or go listen to my book. It's all there. It's like, what, $20? It's all there. But until then, and even after then, I will be doing these integrative groups, because some of us learn really well with a book and we're self-starters. We can just go out there and do it. Others really want to have their hands held. I know I did. I needed my hands held by many mentors in the last 20 years. I was learning and healing and recovering from things. So this nutrition group has been created as of last year, and it was a gorgeous first group to address everything I'm talking about here. Our traumas, our eating disorders, our eating habits, the nutritional and emotional needs beneath our cravings, the biochemical education and understanding of how food affects the nervous system and adrenals and the glucose, and how we just love food in a pleasurable way. How as animals or animal bodies, we search for food that gives us the highest glucose hit. Once you understand these pieces around food and you understand the food industry, you can start to better, I say, understand or even better love your body. So when you're in the grocery store walking down the aisles, you understand the foods are begging for your attention. I'm not even talking about the marketing. I'm saying when you're walking down the aisle and you have low glucose or a glucose imbalance, or you are in a high insulin state, your body is looking for more of a glucose hit. And so if it sees a bag of potato chips next to a bag of salted cashews, it's going for the potato chips because that's going to turn into glucose within 10 minutes. Those cashews, they're going to take like 45 minutes or longer to start shifting your blood sugar. And they're not even going to turn into glucose that quickly. So your body has to make energy from the fat that's in them. So it's a long, slow burning energy versus a quick one. When you understand these little things, you start to learn how to shop differently. And you start to learn how to, in a way, coach your own body. You become the parent or the friend to your body. My wife likes to call it as if your body was a pet. You get to be really kind to your body and say, ooh, those chips do look good. They have a lot of glucose for us. That's why we want them. We're going to eat some cashews for the next 10 minutes while we walk around the aisles and get some more groceries. And the glucose starts to settle. The body starts to settle. We get into balance. And then you're making food choices from a place of wanting to nourish yourself instead of a place from wanting to soothe yourself. And then once you're in that place, you get to eat for pleasure and nourishment. You get to say, I want a greasy slice of pizza. I'm going to have that. And on my way, I'm going to make sure, or before I go, I'm going to have some beans and some broccoli, and then I'm going to enjoy that pizza. Not to earn it, but to balance it out. So I'm going to teach all this and so much more. And you have Monday through Friday, one-on-one support the entire 6 months. So if you have food allergies, if you have fears, if you have a lot of emotions coming up, we have so many resources for you that are part of the cost in this 6-month program. But we also have therapists standing by who will do one-on-one work, who have done this program before and who are nutritionists themselves, or who are somatic therapists, some are psychologists, and they are there to help you go even deeper into certain sessions if certain things come up and you need that additional support. So again, I'm thrilled to be doing this work. I kind of let nutrition fall by the wayside for the last 8 years or so as I was really focusing on somatics. I was still doing nutritional work, but I wasn't publicly doing it as much because I was really being called to educate people in fawning and trauma response because I have such a unique way of teaching that. And this amazing thing happened where Hay House, who I pitched my book to, thanks to Asha Frost, my dear sister from Canada, who said, hey, I'm going to give you this outline, fill it out. I'm going to give you a person to contact. They need to know your work. Your work needs to be in the world, she said. She was such an incredible, and still is, incredible support for me of getting this book into the hands of an actual publishing company instead of self-publishing. I never wanted to write a book, but they said to me, hey, your theories on somatics and trauma, they're really big and vast. And everyone is writing a fucking book about somatics right now. So let's talk about nutrition and trauma, because I can't think of one book that exists around that. There are books that talk about it, that go into it, but a book that's just about nutrition and trauma and actually how to, and this is what to eat, and this is what to reduce, doesn't exist. So I said, yes, I would love to. Let's do it. So I was called to do nutrition work publicly again. And that same year, I was called to Costa Rica, to the Blue Spirit Retreat Center, to do a week of nutrition with them because their nutritionist was unable to attend. So this interesting thing happened where these two different companies, and companies never contact me. I've been like the misfit of the trauma world doing it my own with my team for a while. But to have two different organizations reach out and say, hey, can you do nutrition and trauma work with us? I started noticing like, okay, universe, I hear you. I need to start doing this publicly. So going into the book and researching it and writing it, and oh my God, the endless edits, I know this so much better now than I ever have. I have research to back it up. I have personal case studies. I have my own experience. I have so much going into this particular nutrition group that I didn't even have in the last one. So I'm especially excited to dive in, teach you so much more than I was able to teach before, and help a whole new group of people from all around the world leave these 6 months better understanding their bodies and better relating to food, which is so important because food is the land. Food is our culture. When you relate to food differently, you relate to the earth differently, and then you relate to your body differently. So I can't not see food as a massive puzzle piece and player in the conversation of trauma recovery, stress recovery, land relationship, cultural repair around cultural trauma and rupture that comes from bad land practices and unethical work conditions for farmers and manufacturers and factories and you name it. So all of this comes together for me just through our relationship with what's on our plate. And when you understand your animal body and how your traumas and your biochemistry choose your food, you start getting more agency about how you wish to nourish yourself. I hope this episode was helpful. I'm really curious where it goes for you. Please feel free to write us emails. I always love to hear what comes up. And I'll look forward to seeing any of you who wish to join me in this 6-month program, which again starts on Tuesday, July 8th. See y'all there. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. If you want to learn much more about nutrition, especially through the somatic lens and how you can use food to recover from stress and trauma, there's really no better time than now, because I am about to lead a 6-month nutrition group that begins on July 8th. This group meets every week for 6 months, and I will teach you everything from somatic practices to help you be with the emotions that come up around dieting and food, as well as the nutritional biochemical component of protein, carbohydrates, fats, and how to understand instinctive eating in a way that nourishes your body instead of just soothing your emotions. When you bring somatic practices with nutritional ones, you get to eat for nourishment and then learn other ways to hold your emotions and tend to yourself instead of using food that could be detrimental to your health and your balance of your body. For more information about this group, please click on the link below in the episode details, and you have until July 7th to register. I look forward to seeing you in there. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details.
Getting there, it was just, I could tell something special was about to happen.
There's just something about in-person retreats that just doesn't compare to online space.
Minla is outstandingly beautiful. Why not be there with Luis and his team?
My body knew that something intense was going to happen in the most beautiful way.
It was all about getting what each and every one of us needed and what the community needed.
My biggest takeaway is that I got introduced to myself.
We're just a bunch of misfits trying to find community with one another, and that's where my heart just blasted open because I felt like seen, and yeah, it was beautiful. I loved it.
Oh, and I forgot to mention something very important. I'm offering a $700 discount for anyone who registers before April 15th because this is our last US-based HLN team retreat until 2027. In 2026, we'll be doing this in Europe. So if you want to get in this year in upstate New York, in America, please visit holisticlifenavigation.com, click on events, find the retreat, and when you go to the registration page, make sure you type in the discount code HLN700. And as long as it's before April 15th, you get $700 off your entire purchase. So check the calendar right now, and if it's before April 15th, go register, enjoy the discount, and I cannot wait to see you there.